A random text message a day made me start thinking about making a dog leash for walking two dogs at the same time, two small dogs that walk pretty much right next to each other. And the text message was a picture of them with the leashes all twisted together. So I want to make a leash that splits off to two dogs, has a swivel so that it doesn't get twisted up, and it's going to have some clips for, again, small dogs. If you're making a leash for a bigger dog, you're going to want to upsize these some. But I'm going to use this strap of Latigo that I had laying around. And Latigo is a good strong strap leather for things like this, for reins and dog leads, because it's actually not just a vegetable tan or a chrome tan process usually. Sometimes it is just vegetable tan. But it's usually a mixture of processes. Like it'll be part chrome and part vegetable tan, or part alum tan and part vegetable tan. And what that produces is a leather that it's strong when it's thick, it's strong when it's thin. They usually oil it and wax it really well to make it good for outdoor gear, and nice and supple. It's an all-around good leather for straps if you want something nice and strong. It's also used for laces and so on. But anyway, I've got this piece that I got laying around from past projects. It's got a little bit of a crook at the end that never got straightened out. But it's pretty much the size I need for what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this scrap to do this. It's about 3/4 of an inch wide and around 5 feet long. But anyway, I'm going to take 3 feet of it. And that's going to be our part that's actually the lead. The actual part that goes in your hand. More on that later. How we're going to make that. Then the other part, which again also has this little crook down at the end, it'll mostly straighten out. And for what I'm going to do, it's probably not going to matter that much. But then I'm going to take this piece, and about 2 feet of it, which is most of it, and I'm going to take and leave some of it to be folded over, and it'll get knotted together with a bleed knot. So I need to leave myself enough room to do that. Probably somewhere in there. So I'll go down just a bit further, and from there on I'm going to split it into two pieces. So we'll say right around in here. Now there's different ways I could go about doing this, and I've thought about several of them. I could just take a strap cutter and try and get that to do the job, which probably the easier way, would take a little bit more setup. What I'm going to do instead is mark a line, hopefully close to the middle of this strap. And I should have two pieces that are about 3/8 of an inch wide when I'm done. And I'll just cut that with my round knife. And I'll cut starting at this hole I punched and go out from there. Alright, that'll actually split out to the two dogs. So they'll be able to get about 3 feet away from each other. Well, not quite that once I put the clips on there, but pretty close. Now next, let's go ahead and finish up some edges. Should cut off these corners too while I'm at it. If you take and just dog ear the corners of the straps, just take those corners off, you don't have the edge of the strap where that corner's pointing out and becomes wider than the rest of the strap eventually. It's just a quick way to prevent that for a kind of rustic look. I wasn't paying enough attention and poked myself with the round knife a little bit. Right, let's get back to that. All right. And I'll bevel all the edges. Okay, this should be the lengthiest part of the project, is actually finishing up edges. Get them all beveled. Get them slicked. First gonna throw some gum trag on them and then use some canvas scraps to slick them down. Quick and easy. Now, how we actually turn these pieces into a dog leash. So I've got my scrap bits here, and my swivel here is on an example of kind of what I'm going to be doing. It's called a bleed knot. I've also heard it called a blood knot, but it's pretty much a way of looping a piece of leather, and you can run it through a slot, and then pull it through a slot in the other piece, and it all locks into place. It's used a lot on saddles, where they use the saddle strings are put on through slotted conchos. I've got a little strap here. I also have used it putting straps onto an archery quiver. I've done a video of that. I've used them before to just add tassel type decorations onto things. And I've used them on zipper pulls. You can put them through, a smaller one of course, through a tongue of a zipper, and tie that little knot and have them hanging down to where you got something you can grab onto on a bag or something. But pretty much how these are usually done, which is not necessarily exactly what I'm going to be doing, is you've got a slot in your top piece that you pull the bottom piece up through. And then you've got to cut a slot in your top piece that you pull your bottom piece up through. So it's always top piece, bottom piece up through. It's just they swap places. So the one that was the bottom piece becomes the top piece, and you cut a slit in it, and you've got yourself a bleed knot. Kind of decorative, very easy to do. Doesn't take much in the way of equipment. I mean, you just need a knife to make these. But there's a problem with doing them the way I just mentioned, is you have to have both ends where you can access them to tuck through the slot in the other piece. And on a dog leash, like I've mocked up here with my swivel, you can see this end that's going to be the hand loop. It's a little small right here, again, just a mock-up. That's got a bleed knot in it, and this end's got a bleed knot in it. So it's a little harder to try and get that end through, and then this end of course is just hanging out down there. So, but there is a bit of a trick, and I'll go into that as I do this. Now first and foremost, I need to lay out enough of it to be a hand loop. So that's going to be a good foot of this probably, maybe even a little bit more than that, to really have something you can get your hand through and still have room for that knot. And I'm going to go ahead and punch holes on each end of what I'm going to make the knot, just to make it a little bit stronger. And I make them a little more than an inch apart. Let's see, that's about an inch and an eighth. Obviously, I'm just eyeballing it, so that's not really important, but it needs to be wide enough that you can easily get the strap through it. And actually, it needs to be wide enough we can get one of our pieces of our hardware through it. So I may wind up widening these if necessary. Now you can just go back to your round knife or a utility knife to cut these. I've even used a wood chisel before to cut these. It actually works very well. I just don't have one sitting here at the moment. But as usual, if you make a hole at the end so you don't cut past it and leave a nick, you don't want to cut past it, so cut from each hole in until they meet. I'm concerned I'm going to have to cut larger slits because these are really tight. Because this is a pretty thick strap of leather. But we'll see. Now, first, we're going to do it with the other end available on our strap loop end. So, as I said, it's a pretty simple task. In this case, we're just going to fold it down, tuck it through that other slot, which, as you can see, even though it's an inch and an eighth and the strap is 3/4, it fills up that strap pretty well, or that slot pretty well. So you do have to have a little bit more than what you might expect, because you got to deal with the thickness of the leather as well. On a thinner piece of leather, it wouldn't make as much difference. And then we're going to take this other end that I just cut those slots in, and we're going to put it through this other slot. And then pull everything down tight, twist it around a little bit to even it up. That's one end of our strap. That'll be the handle loop. And that is the easy one. The other end, we need to make sure our pieces of hardware are going to fit through. Just barely. That's what I wanted, was just barely. Get these to fit like that. So I'm going to take and put the piece of hardware on it and slide this end down over it. Maybe some fighting with it if you're using this thick of a piece of leather. Slit was because I've got to get now that piece of hardware and a doubled over piece of this leather to go through there. Haha! Success! Of course, that's only one of them. There we go. Because I want it to slide down until it pops around like that. So you see, it's sort of like what's on this other side, only it's got a twist in it. So you could technically do both of them like that. Actually, I think this looks a little bit better sometimes. But now we need to get it through this piece, so we can slide that up against it. And we're going to need our end piece to wind up on there. So that's going to be a tricky bit to try and get that to pull through. So I'm going to go ahead and lengthen this hole just to be sure. And I'll just do that by punching a hole a little bit further down the strap. And cutting to meet our previous one. Because again, on a thinner leather like this, that size hole was fine. On this thicker, this is about 9 to 10 ounce leather, not so much. Alright. Now we could of course technically just run this down and leave it as a single loop. Always possible. I don't really like those that much. My bits. Need to be over here. There we go. And like I said, I'm going to pull that through, and these are going to twist again, which is what's really difficult in this thicker leather. But once you got it through and twisted, just a matter of working it all down nice and neat and tight. And you come out with this really cool twisted sort of knot. That people aren't going to be able to figure out quite how you managed to do. So we're going to do the same stuff on this one. We're going to put, again, we can't get to both sides of this strap. Especially once we go to put these on, because it's together. You can't pull all that through there. You don't have another end down here. It merges into another strap. So we're going to have to do these the same way I just did that. But this end we can put on a regular bleed knot. But a regular bleed knot isn't going to look right compared to sitting right next to this one. So we're going to have to do this one in a somewhat similar manner. But it's not possible to pull this all through. So, bit of a paradox. But we'll see what we can come up with. Then, if I go ahead and loop this around, like that, and do the same thing on this one. Like that. Then I can tie it like a regular bleed knot. By putting that short end through first. And then putting these two ends through here. And I'll have the twists in it like the bleed knot next to it. So it'll look right, but not be basically impossible to tie. So now we've got our handle, we've got our swivel so that the dogs don't get all tied up with each other. And I just have to put the little hooks down on the end. Now of course I could go the easy way and just loop these back and put a rivet in them. I mean, it's possible. And it's probably what you'd see most often, but I'm going to try and do exactly the same thing. It's getting kind of narrow for this, but we should be able to pull it off and put a bleed knot in each of these. So I'm going to roll back again a couple inches to have room to tie my knot. And the same way, we're going to need a slot there and a slot here. Alright, second verse, same as the first. Slide this piece down. Pull our leather through. Twist this around to the inside. There we are. And then slide it up through that slot. Pull it all down tight. Again, this is for a small dog. For a bigger dog, I would have done a completely different setup where I didn't split this down to 3/8 wide. Something like this size lead with just a single lash on it would be what I would suggest for a bigger dog. So probably 3/4 wide. But for these little dogs, this will work just fine. Alright, and that's really about all there is to this. Actually, one of those wound up a little shorter than the other. That'll be fine. So I've got 2 dogs, a swivel, and a strap to hold on to.